also work in this mode. So if you could explain how DeepWork works and what it offers. Yes.
Oh, so you mean the organization, right? Not the book. Okay, good. Well, okay, yeah. I mean that's a good good start, I guess. So DeepWork is to the outside it looks like a design studio, or it has its own website. It has case studies. There is a very kind of specific quality standard. We're also very open about the case studies to kind of show how we actually work. But to the inside, it's just a collective of freelancers. So there's
Okay, cool. So thank you so much, Andrej, for joining us today. Great to have you. And I'd like to ask you first a little bit about your background and your personal story. So, what brought you to blockchain? What brought you to working on the new ways to organize labor? And how did it all happen?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for the invitation as well. Yeah, I mean, I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I had a relatively non-linear path of education and career, so I explored a lot of things and went into film and design and maths and computer science, psychology, and dribbled around all these different places a little bit. And along the way, also mined a little bit of Bitcoin. Back in God knows when, lost my hardware wallet twice, which had Bitcoin on it. And over time, so at some point, I think it was like 2015, I started working in a UX design studio here in Berlin because it combined my interests in psychology and computer science, which is a little bit strange because it was more like design and if on first glance does not have a lot of overlaps. But back then, we already worked in very interesting kind of design thinking based ways of organizing teams. And it was what was mind blowing was the contrast between how people collaborated on a film set and how people would collaborate in this office with sticky notes and not having any conversations or like very little conversations, but actually getting to a result much faster. And because it was so much better or so much more efficient, made me just interested in how to make that even better and like how to use the in-office setting of people working together and make that possible remotely. Because I was also kind of somehow convinced that working remotely is going to be probably the future for people. They will have to be like, it gives people a lot more freedom and flexibility. And yeah, so I was working there from 2015 to like 2017 approximately, or 18, and developed kind of ways to organize remotely around design sprints, met up with Jake Knapp as well along the way. We did some like workshops together. And then, I think 2018 or so, I started going deeper into the Web3 space because I saw that I wanted to leave that agency because they were not interested in remote or like in online based collaboration. And I thought that it would be useful and the best place to start would be the Web3 space because, not only is that I perceive that as the future of the economy, and if there's a lot of money there, then I will probably be fine or will be able to pay my bills. But also, I could see that the methods of collaboration, especially in an online space, would offer novel ways for open source teams to collaborate on design rather than collaborating on code. Which was back then already like pretty common. And yeah, from there I met a guy, my co-founder, who we just decided to start the remote or like online native agency with. We called it DeepWork because there were a lot of principles from the book that we thought were useful. and then focused only on that niche in Web3. So we only worked on projects in Web3. Now I think it's more than 43 different projects since 2019. And it also offered really nice ways to actually learn about the Web3 space a lot. So each project was a huge experience in understanding how everything works. And that was very, very exciting. I think that kind of covers it. So I would say that generally my strategy is more based on kind of curiosity and trying to find the things that seem hard, but also somehow meaningful. And yeah, I'm still very excited about the development of the Web3 space. And everything else is basically was solving problems along the way. So like how I got into organizational design was more because we had to build this Web3 with this design studio, and a lot of things just didn't work. Like we couldn't pay people on payroll because the market would fluctuate too much. We had to open source and publicize our internal documentation because otherwise we wouldn't be able to attract talent or have a consistently high quality control or like quality of work. And yeah, and then I got into complexity science a little bit and started understanding how these systems work and how to kind of design them on the same principles of product design. Sorry, that was like a huge, that was not that short.
Ontology of value, we help professionals with developing their potential, building value, and navigating towards their dream careers. We offer intensive career orientation courses combining self-discovery with practical information about the job market. We also work on our own educational materials such as books and self-navigation manuals. Our new tool, the Ontology of Value test, will help you discover what your natural way of creating value in the job market is and which working environment fits you best. If you'd like to stay in touch with us and receive monthly updates, please subscribe to the newsletter.
Story. And I have to say that I talk with professionals a lot about their career paths, and I have a general feeling that this is how like a typical career path. So typical career path today looks non-typical, and
yeah.
I think we all have to. It's like action reaction, right? You have to react to like fast changing job market, and to stay afloat, you have to change plans like every now and then. Otherwise, you just fall behind, and that's very very typical what I hear. But that's good. I mean, I can see that you're a problem solver. So whatever problem comes on top as the most important one, then you go for it. So it's very entrepreneurial, but it's exactly how one should navigate. So yeah, and actually I have a question about the book. So for those who don't know, the Deep Work by Cal Newport is like a world bestseller. It's all about the necessity to spend time on like real like focused work, and that's creates your value as a professional, and not the snippets of information that that we use to exchange and the working memory of a goldfish that we like to develop. But actually, this is kind of, for me, it's a bit counterintuitive. So what is the connection between the book and what you do? Because for me personally, internet as a whole is the direct opposite of deep work. That's exactly what distracts me from this deep work.
Right. Well, I think it was more about setting up constraints and practices around the organization that would almost like deliberately limit our ways to be so noisy and so like distracted in order to make us focused on the work. So one of the very first principles we adopted was that we would not have working days longer than 4 hours. And what it did was that it made us conscious about how we actually spend these 4 hours. And also we held each other accountable for that, to that. So we would only spend 4 hours a day, but then we would also like focus in that period of time, or we would try to put as much kind of deep work into that period of time so that we had the other time for other things. Obviously we work like, at least I spent more time than 4 hours a day working. A lot of people make fun of me for that, but it's definitely like, I think especially in terms of client projects, it was actually very helpful because we could also very specifically predict how much time a project would take, because we would say we work like 3 days of these series of workshops. Each day takes 4 hours. and then we do 3 days of like design work, and then we do like 2 days of user research, because we knew that for ourselves. And then people were like, okay, that's great, it's only like what, 8 days, and that's the completion of an entire project. And so that's a kind of simple example to think about it. And now I would say it evolves a lot further. So we basically take these principles and we look at the infrastructure that we have. And by infrastructure, I mean, again, like things like constraints, or how people get paid, or what are the ways that they can express their opinion, which tools are we using, and what the data that they're receiving. And then we're trying to kind of take these principles and like implement them in these different like places. So for example, our Discord is designed so that there's actually not a lot of space to be able to just have chatter. Like there's like maybe one channel, which is maybe now there's two, but I have to basically remove one of them. That's the constraint design, which just allows just kind of open conversation, and that means that everything else is focused on work. So all of the other channels are actually only about meaningful stuff. So you can go away and like not do stuff, but if you come back, you know exactly that here's the things that you have to reread or read up, because they're actually useful and meaningful. So I think it's more about trying to reduce as much noise as possible and trying to implement these practices so that whoever comes into the organization, they almost like have to adhere to these principles, and they will have a much better experience working if they try not to get distracted, if they do spend some time working out, if they take some time off if they don't feel well balanced. So yeah, I guess that's probably the easiest way to describe it.
Okay, very interesting. Maybe we could also explain like more like the basics of how deep work works as a concept for those who never heard about it before. So because I think it's very interesting, it just puts the idea of freelancing to the next level, so that now the whole organizations and businesses can also work. So if you could explain how deep work works and what it offers. Yes.
Oh, so you mean the organization, right? Not the book. Okay, good. Well, okay, yeah. I mean that's a good start, I guess. So deep work is to the outside, it looks like a design studio, or it has its own website. It has case studies. There is a very kind of specific quality standard. We're also very open about the case studies to kind of show how we actually work. But to the inside, it's just a collective of freelancers. So there's no payroll. Nobody is obliged to, or is like asked to do work. People come in because there is either a mutual understanding that collaboration is useful, or they are by themselves interested in contributing, and everything else is project based. And I would say that that's where essentially that infrastructure starts being a little bit different from traditional organizations, is that pretty much everything we do is always a project. So regardless of what the work consists of. So we started off as a service design agency, which is we took something, well, the design service, something that seemed or used to be quite intangible and like unspecified. A lot of agency would say, like, yes, we can design all of these things for you, and that creates cash flow, so that makes us sustainable. And we were saying, okay, no, we really only do this thing, which takes 8 days, and we only do that particular work for a very tiny niche of customers, and that's the project. And so we could specify exactly which roles are required in that project and how much time it takes. And also we were able to say, like, this is the exact cost of a project. So because we could say, like, okay, we assume that this is the value, are you willing to pay? And then clients would say, no, that's too expensive, or like they would say, yeah, we can afford that. And that, yeah.
I actually have a question. I mean, I'm not a designer, but I'm a fan of the Futur and his YouTube channel.
Nice.
So He actually posts a lot of materials for designers, like with advice for how to value projects. Because what is interesting is that his philosophy is to price the projects based on value, not based on working hours. So I'm curious if you have similar approach to the food.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the founder of the agency that I was working with also is either friends or he invited Christo over to Berlin too at some point. And yeah, I really like kind of the emphasis of this like meritocratic, more meritocratic payment or compensation model, especially in design. And I think it's important because design is seen as something that actually is like very hard to define. But the point is that just because it doesn't have like numbers or an hourly rate, because the quality is so different, I think we almost like we have the opportunity to develop strategies to actually define the value. And we probably need to get more precise about it, because essentially it doesn't matter what kind of work you do, you always work always has certain value to the economy. Like, I don't know, cooking dinner is probably not as valuable as like, I don't know, building a house or something. And I'm really bad with examples, but like it always depends on kind of the actual meaning for, or like the value it offers for the quantity of people. And so I think, yeah, Christo is also very kind of focused on making sure that people have an understanding of the value that they really create. So you always want to kind of make an assumption about the work that you do, and then like put it out there and assume that that's the value, but then also be receptive for feedback that shows you whether it's too expensive or like not expensive enough. Because there's problems with both sides. Like if you overvalue your work and you charge too prices that are too high, not only will you often get rejected, but it could also mean that those who will pay you that money might distract you from something that you actually find meaningful, and you end up doing work for like large corporations who might want to throw money at you, but you're not actually solving like real world important problems. I'm not saying that that's overall the case. I'm saying that is a potential kind of fallacy. But the same thing can happen on the other side, where you like undervalue your work, or you do free work. Like you should never do work like that you would consider valuable for free unless you have like really no idea how much it's worth, or actually even then. I mean, I would say only in cases where you wouldn't consider it work, you would consider it an experiment or something. But if you charge too little or nothing at all, then there will be no value. So like you're not communicating that what you're doing is actually valuable. So you have to be kind of very specific about asking for the value of the work. And if people don't tell you or don't give you that money, well, then it's probably not that valuable, and maybe you should try something else.
Right.
So, yeah.
Actually, I personally, I'm fresh as a consultant. I also do some consultancy gigs on the side, and like my personal approach, like I do something else. So I do more like business consultancy and research consultancy, and my personal approach is that I always look at how close the output of my work is to generating revenue. So like if this is like a purely research project for a university, then I charge like maybe 50, 60 euros per hour, because it's like something I like doing for my own development, and it's for humanity, not for anything else. When I'm working for like private like startup and that is funded already, then it's like 100 and more. And if it's for venture capital firm, then it's like 200 and more, because it's like it directly leads to their investments getting better. So it's very direct link. So that's my approach, but I'm also new. So maybe in 5 years it's completely different.
Yeah, I would probably look at these things as different markets. And again, like you will probably always find a difference in the value of the work that you do. So I would say that it's maybe a good start to just estimating what the price is, if you look at the kind of wealth of your customers. But then it also almost like realistically it would have to be relative to the severeness of the problems that you're solving. So with like research projects, it's like they might be, again, like they might be more experiments, and of course there's like less value in those because you just don't know what's going to come out of them for the most part. Whereas if you're really solving something that's like fundamentally is going to change or direct an organization's strategy or perspective, that's higher value. And yeah, there's like different markets, different customer audiences in which you need to like find out what works.
Actually, I had a problem with valuing one project recently because I'm involved in a research project, and it's super important because it's an agent-based model to model the pandemic, COVID-19, and it works really well. And I'm helping with drafting the manuscript. Like the results are really, really good. And the team was working on this with breaks for like a few years, and I just adopted the model to the pandemic, and it was working perfectly. And it is just something really important. And also the team is actually friends, like we've been friends for 15 years, and it's like when I do this project I feel like I'm resting. I'm actually, after spending time on it, I'm less tired than before because it's so much fun even talking to them. So I'm like, how do I value this if I'm actually chilling here? And yeah, it's my relaxed time. And yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, again, I think it's not necessarily about like, I mean, obviously how you feel too about it, but I mean, I would say the easiest way to define the value of a project is if you can specify the conditions under which you fulfill that project. So the scope of the project, like what's the effort required, as well as the environment and the market and the customers. And if you can do that on a repetitive basis within these very similar conditions, and then each time you basically try and make an assumption on how much that work is worth. And if you do that like 3 to 5 times, you'll get a really good idea of like, now this part of work, this piece of work in that environment is worth this particular amount. And I mean, to me, that always gives me kind of a very good reference point, because then I can say, okay, let's change one of these conditions. Let's take a different customer audience. So how would that value change? And then you can kind of make an assumption on how you price the next thing that would be kind of slightly outside of it. Or if you're kind of, yeah, if you're saying like, this is super fun and this is nice. Well, I think it's, yeah, also kind of see it in context, because it can still be super valuable and also super fun.
Right. I think two variables are moving, like the markets are moving and the pricing is moving, but your skills are also moving, because like the more, like the stronger personal brand, the more it should go up. So it's actually, sometimes it's hard to evaluate that for yourself, and but you yourself also objectively. Yeah,
I agree. I think yeah. Sorry,
I just wanted to say that personally, I feel that there are like 5 different, like I'm just writing my second book, and it's all about self-navigating in the job market. And then I feel that there are 5 different levels of like proficiency in self-navigation in the job market. Like the lowest being just picking jobs at random, and then being a bit more skilled, and then being able to, on the 3rd level, being able to create a new position for yourself, and then on the 4th level, being able to create a new profession for yourself. And then the last one is just becoming yourself, and that's your profession, when people come to you specifically, and you can charge them for being you specifically. So I'm actually that's in my. And then so once you become a good freelancer, that should be your like main aim, right? To be this person who everyone wants to have in their own corner, so they are willing to pay extra for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually not that hard to get to that stage. It's just the problem is that in our current economy, a lot of these skills that you accrue as you kind of progress up that ladder, they're invisible, and they're mostly also invisible to you, and that's what makes it super confusing. So you're like you go forward and you gather skills, but then you have no idea what they are. You can't define them really. And I think that maybe like one thing that can help look at these things is also like kind of look at it as deliverables. So the way that I often also look at these things, or like strategize about it, is that you if you have a certain position in an organization, or like, let's say it can be an organization of one, you're just like a freelancer. But like that particular position, that role that you embody, that's your kind of skill. And then the more you go over like an iteration on that particular skill, the more proficiency you get. And then the more different iterations over different skills you gather, the more unique you become as opposed to other people. So the more kind of what is it called? Like singular you become, or like distinguishable you become from other combinations of different skills. And then it almost becomes kind of an interesting challenge about how do you accrue new skills and combine them in a way that the combination of those becomes like positive sum valuable for the economy, and then it becomes you.
That's also what I often teach people, like in terms of self-navigating, that
Nice.
we often like think about our core competencies as separate beings, but in fact you have to, it's like pieces on a chessboard, and you have to play with all of them, and it's like you have to position yourself so that all of them are in the game. So it's like, and simple example I can give is like in most professions also you need, like you would think that there is one central skill that you need, but there is actually a cluster. Like the famous example, Avicii, the deceased DJ, like he was great at making music, but he was always getting paranoid about playing live concerts. So he didn't have the ability, and he was just, if you look at his live concerts, he's just mortified on the scene. Like he was loved by the crowd, but he was just so stressed, and it killed him. Like you cannot be a DJ. Even if you're the best music maker, you cannot be a DJ if you are too stressed to go out to the crowd. That's like something you don't think about initially, but this is a disqualifying factor. So it's like just an example that usually you have to have like a set of skills around the central talent, not just one thing.
Yeah, I agree. And in my personal experience, I think I actually had a very similar experience. I used to do like I still sometimes do magic, like perform magic, and then I went on stage for a while, but I was always super nervous. It was obviously not something that I could spend my life on. But I think that like specifically if you kind of if you can specify what that skill is that you're lacking, like that makes you stressed or uncomfortable, essentially it's the limitations are only within your beliefs. So if you can specify it, you can work on particularly that area and like get experience and more comfort in that particular area, and then also become more skilled in that, so that it makes you more fulfilled. If you think that is like particularly valuable for you or meaningful, because it could also mean that the reason why it's like why going on stage is super like uncomfortable is because it seems like there's other directions that seem to be more worth or more like valuable. But yeah, I think in my experience, a lot of these things are also about like kind of limitation in beliefs, and beliefs can always change and also give us freedom to do other things.
I also like in this place I could also add something. So actually I was thinking a lot about this hustle culture that we all like fall into, and this like basically promotes like fast growth, that you have to like just run and try to grow your business as fast as possible and grow your brand and just grow as fast as possible. But I think there is some intrinsic value to slow growth, that because for instance, let's imagine you are a shy person, and then if you become famous overnight, you probably won't take it like on your mind, you will break. But if you grow slow, then just organically, without any major like groundbreaking events, but just organically, slowly extending your network and recognition, then it's just only one follower at a time. The numbers will slowly grow. And that's what I also experience. I'm extremely shy, but when I see that like my following just grows like monotonically slowly, I'm like, okay, it's like 5,000 people on LinkedIn, but yesterday it was 4,990, so it's no difference, right? And it's like from day to day it's like that. And I think if it goes like this, then at some point it will be 100,000 and I won't feel anything because it was so slow. So I feel it's also many of the fears you experience can just be solved by just slow growth without doing anything crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's generally, I mean, obviously it depends on kind of the economic status or financial status and the environment that you're in, because there's a lot of like places that, well, offer the financial stability, or like, especially like in Europe, a lot of countries are kind of very, like very supportive of it. There's a very good support network. And if you can leverage that, or if you can kind of understand that there is a lot of freedom in kind of spending the time on things that you find meaningful, then slow growth is certainly very valuable, because it will basically make you live longer than live faster, and yeah, you'll just be able to pay more attention to things, because I think, like, as you mentioned earlier, I think, like, regardless of how fast you grow, you always want to pay attention to the kind of most important signals, and things will get like very, very difficult to spot, and like in my experience, I have to like always be very, very mindful about a lot of things, and how I just generally feel, because sometimes it's not even verbalizable what's going on, but then if I stop and pay attention to things, then some kind of issues or signals will emerge or make themselves more obvious. So yeah, I think for the most part, and especially in Web3, there's no necessity to go fast. I think it's actually detrimental. Going too fast is just going to break, well, I mean, break things, but like it's just not going to be sustainable, and not very helpful. And it's difficult, because a lot of projects also receive a lot of funding, and there is an expectation on fast growth because of the funding. So that's also kind of tricky, but I think, yeah, it's definitely easier to, long term, it's easier to be as mindful as possible about any funding or any like trajectory of development. It just pays off more. Like this, things changed too quickly to not be able to pay attention.
Absolutely. Okay, and I'd like to now ask you a few questions about the work, about your organization. So it feels like from the sidelines, it feels like it's a Fiverr inverted. So it's like, instead of freelancers advertising stuff, it's actually projects that come on board, right? And then freelancers can bid for the projects. So can you tell us a little bit more who can join your organization, and how it looks? How does the process of selecting teams look?
Well, I think so. Maybe like one thing that I should say. I mean, it's technically it's permissionless as much as it can be. So that means everything is public. Like, you can just come on our Discord and, in theory, find work through going through Discord and reading a documentation, and get, you know, in touch with clients as the demand kind of requests for. But in practice, it's actually also not that difficult. So in practice, the fundamental structure is not the structure. Let me put it a different way. The fundamental result is actually not that different from a traditional organization, except that a lot of these kind of things like recruitment or compensation or governance, they're very decentralized. So rather than you going into like let's say an organization, and you have an HR department, or you have a founder, and then you're applying there, and then you came through that huge hurdle, and now you have, like, you know, the freedom to find a position in that place. That kind of recruitment or hiring strategy is decentralized to every individual who has proven that they can do valuable work. And so it basically becomes you looking for, so it's kind of, I would say it's kind of a difference between an organization trying to find new people for work, or freelancers trying to find some job, into something that is more like, hey, how do we establish the most meaningful relationship with each other? So you like the people that we can see in deep work are always interested in the actual work and participating in projects that they find are just interesting to them. Of course, that's not always like easy to predict what kind of projects will come around, but everybody always has a choice. And there's a lot of different like strategies why people why people make these decisions and why they want to contribute. But yeah, essentially, if you're just kind of coming from anywhere, you can find what a Discord looks like, and then anytime a new project comes up, it's clear what that project is about, and it has a certain team, and then you would basically establish a relationship with one of the people whose work interests you the most. So whether it's like a user researcher, or like a product designer, or a workshop facilitator, or anything else, you basically try to find that particular person who's doing the work, and like establish a relationship with them, because you want to kind of prove to them that you're interested in the work, and you can also like do it, or do it at least to some extent, to which they will also keep helping you learning more. And over time, as you work project by project, you basically get better. And obviously the experts on the projects, they also have their own strategies about who they tend to work with. And these strategies can differ always. Like some people are interested in finding someone they just personally like to work with over a long period of time. Other people pick some of their friends already because they know them and want to push them. Other people just want to make sure that they find a person who is worth investing in, because they will replace them in the organization. So yeah, I think that's roughly how it works. So essentially, yeah, people are kind of aggregating around. So and okay, so that's kind of the onboarding part. But I think your question is also related towards the experts, the freelancers actually kind of coming around the project. So because the thing is, like, you basically need to prove at least once that you reach the quality standard that our studio is delivering. So until then, you always work with someone who can do that. And once you are at that level, then you're like verified as an expert in the pool of freelancers that work on projects. And then it's like a project comes up, and a creative director either chooses also their favorite team or makes the project public, and then the team just kind of comes around and fills in the roles. So yeah, it definitely becomes more of like, once you have that verification of skill, it's more about like, you know, whoever is interested in what kind of project, and yeah, whoever's interested in working on it. I hope that explained it a little bit.
I understand. I mean, it's always a trade-off, right? It's like you choose people who you like and people who can do the job. So I guess it's always two factors that play a role. Okay, and do you use some like popular management techniques in your projects, like Scrum or Kanban boards, or like any other?
Yeah.
Like...
I mean, I was mentioning design thinking earlier. I'm a big, also like my post-its background. I'm kind of a big proponent of generally just the kind of use of post-it notes and votes, and like trying to not discuss too much. I wouldn't say that I'm adhering to any of the kind of traditional like models of Scrum or Agile, at least not yet. We are just about kind of to start working on engineering, like putting an engineering team together. So that will probably be more prominent there, or more important. But so far, it's mostly workshops that I use to save time in making decisions together. So I think that's kind of one of the most powerful tools that we have, or that we use, is if we need to make decisions as a collective, or let's say we need to like review how something went over the last month, and we want to improve our organizational infrastructure, then and we have like 15 people, then that can really quickly be very chaotic, especially if you want everybody to contribute with their ideas. And traditionally, you can also use something like Snapshot for governance, but I actually think that the direct democracy is not a very good tool to make decisions together, especially in an organization, because it will always mean that somebody will be left unhappy with the decision. So these workshops that we do are actually very kind of collaborative. So it basically gets everybody together to write out everything that they think they have troubles with, or that they see a problem in. And then without discussing much, we would basically just vote and prioritize the things that seem to be really most important for that group of people. From there, once you prioritize them, you use the same strategy to come up with solutions. So you just also, again, just take some time and write out in text so it's clear and understandable for everyone what's the best solutions. And then you vote on them again, and then you basically have in a very short amount of time easy solutions. So yeah, I would say that's probably the most prominent thing, but everything else is more because the projects are so short at the moment, there's no need to make it more complicated or create you even work with Kanban boards. It's just not required, especially if it's clear that what the responsibilities are of the individuals, and if it's project-based work. So we try to get as soon as possible to something that we can define as a project, and then work with that.
And how do you solve conflicts? Is there any does it happen sometimes that there is a difference in opinions, and how does it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one of the first things that I started kind of employing is that essentially as frequent as possible feedback loops between individuals that are very open and honest about being positive and also negative. So we try to kind of frame the negative feedback as opportunities for improvement. And in fact, I mean, some of our design work also centers around that, because we actually design stuff and then we show it to people, and then it's oh, they don't like it. Well, let's not say it's shit, but let's say there is opportunity for improvement, because that's essentially the meaningful part or the information from it. And so we treat mutual feedback on an individual one-on-one basis in a very similar way. So we after each project is completed, and again, the projects have a very short time span, so for 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks or so. And it gives everybody the opportunity to just check in with themselves and with the other person or with the other people that they're working with, and give each other feedback. And so that essentially is almost like a kind of a decentralized way to, and I know that was kind of a long introduction to that, but it's a very decentralized way to actually make the resolution of conflicts extremely smooth, because people just train giving feedback, expressing themselves, and having a conversation on something that's very, very important to them. And also kind of they learn to listen very well in very small steps, in very kind of, yeah, in low stakes environments, or I would say maybe it's not low stakes, but it's low effort or low, what do you call it? It has a lower mental taxation. So it's not as intense as a huge conflict, but for sure, still conflicts arise. But then my observation is that over time people get better at expressing themselves honestly, because there's always also the etiquette is also listening out this honesty and reacting to that in a more balanced way. I think that's also kind of an actual benefit of online work, because when you read something that you get reactive to, you always have the chance to just step away and take a deep breath, or to balance your autonomic nervous system to stay come back and be okay, I'm gonna reply exactly what I think is right, and not make that situation even worse.
Right. And okay, yeah. I mean, I think this is, I think that there is some common sense around it. Probably it's the like central rule of management: praise in public and criticize in private. So
well,
I think
yeah, well, exactly, yeah. But again, I think like just in terms of the kind of etiquette, it's not that anybody tells people to do so, but it's ingrained in the system that people are operating in. So if you come into the organization and start working, you will automatically be confronted with like questionnaires every now and then to give someone feedback, or you don't get paid. You have to do that in order to be part of the organization. And so yeah, it's like and I mean, you don't have to do it. You can also leave all these things empty. My point is just that it's a very kind of distributed way to communicate to people that something is worth following through, or like there's certain constraints.
I understand. Okay, and I remember that you also have interesting ways to protect mental health of the participants, and you have some additional working benefits that you offer. Can you say something about that?
Oh yeah. So I mean, working in terms of working benefits, there's I guess there's like a few things. We obviously there's like always an opportunity to kind of explore new ideas and new things people are interested in. We have we basically let me think about how to put this right. So there's in some months we have an opportunity to share the profits of the organization in that given month. So I would say that's kind of a benefit that everybody can decide together on whether profits should be distributed to all individuals or if they should be invested in some kind of project. But that's kind of a principle that's almost like being being public about that is a thing that people can kind of participate in or like vote towards. And in terms of mental health, I think like one of the things that I've implemented is essentially making people more aware of their mental health in general and share how they feel on a daily basis. It's not that anybody asks them. Again, it's more like there's a channel in Discord and there's a bot that asks people to just click a heart of a color that they think reflects how they feel. And again, it's not obligatory. Like nobody has to do that. But I think, I mean, I'm doing it every day. And to me, it's like personally helpful to just make sure I can check in with myself before I start doing work. And I think that it's also nice to see from other people, like if something comes up, that I can see that if someone's not doing too well, then I know how to talk to them and or potentially, I mean, even support them in some ways. And there've been a lot of like really kind of, yeah, very kind and open and vulnerable situations where people were open and vulnerable and have been like picked up and how do you say it, like supported very well by the community in regardless of what kind of issue has arisen. It's just very nice to see that people kind of talk about these things, try to express them better. I mean, I was also trying to kind of practice generally my verbal fluency about emotions and kind of the emotional granularity about, because the thing is like people's emotions are very different and people perceive them very differently. And sometimes it's not enough to use a word to describe an emotion. It requires a lot of context. And I think it's good practice to do these things. Yeah, so I think also alongside with the deep work ethos, to me and to I think I would agree. I would assume that our members of the community agree to that. That essentially we want to put a focus on our mental health first, and then we can do good work. And so we always try to stay as balanced as possible and like, you know, work out, and some people meditate, do yoga, and eat healthy, and also open about it and exchange how they do it, because that's part of life, just as work is part of life, especially if it's something that's enjoyable to do, and or sometimes not, but then it's again like it's, you know, you want to stay in balance as much as possible. I think that's also something that keeps our organization relatively resilient to any external shocks. And yeah, I think that covers it.
Great. Yeah, I mean that's great to hear. Well, in the last few years, the recognition of the problem like definitely grew, but I still feel that some businesses more like it's more like a facade that they really care about mental health, and it's less of a actual care. So it's great to hear this. And lastly, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your services for businesses. Like I personally, I'm interested in transforming my company into a DAO in the future. And that's also why I did not name my company after me, because it's based on intellectual property and to large extent on workshops and books that I write. And like many like professional consultants, like business consultants, they were trying hard to persuade me to name a company after myself, like Natalia Bielczyk ENC, like Simon Sinek or Tim Ferriss. And I was like, but this company is not about me. Like it's not supposed to be about me. I would like in the future, I would like to have a collective of writers that write together on like problems related to job market and self-navigation and business as well. And I would like to, that's how I see it, that in the future there will be a tender of projects and topics to write about, and there will be a collective of writers and not just me. So I know that you also offer a consultancy for businesses that are trying that are interested in incorporating the DAO structure in their operation. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, we basically, because from the kind of understanding and learnings, evolving and developing this project-based business, which is like again combining a value structure, so something that is a profitable business, with an infrastructure that is as open and permissionless as, like, you know, an online forum. There's a lot of kind of learnings that are very applicable to essentially any type of business, if it wants to become kind of more resilient and more open. I think so what we're currently offering is essentially helping teams or organizations to essentially stabilize around like what would be a core project that they would be able to offer, and what are the roles that they can find themselves in, because any organization is essentially kind of a positive sum combination of individuals who contribute with their individual skills, and they could, you know, use these skills outside individually, but it's only that this kind of project that they do together is what makes it so unique and the organization worth sustaining. And so we basically also offer workshops to get alignment within a team on what it is that they want to work on, find exactly what roles they occupy and how much time and how much effort these things take, scope out what that project could look like, and then kind of find a way to iterate on it, because that iteration essentially becomes the core of the organization, because that's exactly what's then required, and then over time you kind of figure out how to evolve into something. And then the other thing is, once you already have a business and it is kind of structured and it is already like you can specify certain projects with certain roles, there is a point where you might have such high market demand that you need to scale up. And again, the scaling up is like not as something like hyper growth where you're like, I'm going to fuel in money and then everything's going to be great, but it's a very kind of delicate mechanism of the organization working with the demand of the market. And so if the demand increases, you need to scale up, but you want to scale up organically, if you want to maintain the quality standards. So essentially we help decentralizing the scaling and the recruiting of new individuals. So we help putting together this public documentation of work. What are the exact roles? Like, what do they consist of? It's public so that it becomes like an external attractor for individuals to actually find the organization. And then we are working, or like we have currently an MVP of a tool that makes, like, it's kind of a project management tool in combination with like a how do you call it, verification of skills. So you have like individual profiles, and once an individual has worked on a project and proven to someone else that they have that particular skill required in a project, then they get an attestation. And that means that essentially anyone can join your projects. And if an expert in your organization can verify that, yes, they are able to maintain that quality standard, they get that verification and can then use it and show it somewhere else, or just come back and, because they already have that verification, just be the main lead role on a project. So yeah, essentially these are kind of the core services at the moment. So yeah, we help, in short, yeah, we help projectize what's normally seen as payroll, and then create like public-facing documentation of work and coordinate people.
Awesome. Yeah, I will place the links to your website here in the description. So if you guys are interested, please check it out. Yeah, I'm definitely interested. So yeah, I really believe that DAOs is the model of the future for us. Of course, it's not possible to do it everywhere, but in, I think, vast majority of industries, because this is the preferred model for, like, just let's be real, like for most professionals, it shows in the research that most professionals today prefer the flexibility that freelancing gives. They just would like to have a little bit more like security around it, and that's exactly what DAO offers. So and also community, right? So this is exactly what you do, like community and security around freelancing. So that's freedom. So that's awesome. Great to talk to you today, Andrej. It's amazing what you do. I will be tracking closely the development of deep work, and I hope that, yeah, you will get some. Yeah, I hope to see you grow. I mean, I'm sure to see you grow. I'm actually looking forward how it's gonna pan out, like, and where you get in the next 2, 3, 5 years. I'm sure it's going to be big. I just yeah, maybe you also launch your own token, or
Let's see about